It was the sagely Gorilla Monsoon that coined the nickname the excellence of execution for Bret Hart. And while the Hitman is also a wonderfully concise description of Hart, Monsoon's declaration is perhaps more fitting. Nearly 20 years have passed since Bret Hart took to the ring as a full-time wrestler, and while we've seen wrestlers since perform rather marvelously between the ropes, few have ever matched Hart's combined offering of timing, psychology, realism, precision, and grittiness. Bret Hart was a champion for many reasons, valued for his earnestness and work ethic, beloved for his understated heroics, and legendary for his innate ability to always rise to the occasion. I'm Jack from Cultaholic.com, and this is the captivating career of Bret Hart. Bret, like each of the Hart boys, had a hands-on role in Father Stu's Stampede wrestling promotion in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. He began in 1976 as a referee before lacing up his boots in 1978 as a novice wrestler. By the end of his rookie year, Hart would win both the NWA International Tag Team titles alongside older brother Keith, as well as Stampede's British Commonwealth Mid-Heavyweight title. It was with the latter belt that Hart would gain invaluable experience and credibility through high-impact, fast-paced technical clinics against eventual brother-in-law Tom Dynamite Kid Billington. The two were natural foils for one another, with Hart's humble guile clashing with Dynamite's malevolent disdain. Hart moved on to the heavyweight division in 1980 and would capture the territory's North American title 5 times, all between 1980 and 1983. During this time, Hart feuded with some of the territory's top villains, including David Schultz and Bad News Allen, who sound like my dad's friends from back home. Hart also wrestled frequently in other regions, particularly for New Japan Pro Wrestling in the early 80s. Some of the notable names that Hart wrestled in singles action include Ricky Choshu, George the Cobra Takano, Tatsumi Fujinami, and the original Tiger Mask, among many others. They don't sound like they're from my hometown. Hart even wrestled AWA World Champion Nick Bockwinkel in Calgary in July 1982, losing to the wily veteran via countout. In August 1984, shortly before the birth of his second child Dallas, Hart learned that his father had agreed to a buyout from Vince McMahon, who had designs on expanding WWE into Western Canada. As part of the agreement, Bret, Dynamite Kid, Davey Boy Smith, and eventually Jim Neidhart were all brought in as full-time performers. Though Stampede would eventually resurrect in 1985 after a dispute with Vince McMahon, Hart remained with WWE, where he initially languished at the bottom of the cards as a white meat babyface. His fortunes would change in March 85 when Hart was paired with the Anvil and turned heel to signal the arrival of the now legendary Hart Foundation. Sticking manager Jimmy Hart with the duo only made sense. Over the next couple of years, the Harts showcased their wares in excellent tag team matches with the likes of the Rougeau brothers and the Killer Bees, but especially the British Bulldogs, with the 4 Stampede boys stealing the show on a regular basis. Hart even demonstrated his worth as a masterful singles competitor in March 1986, pushing Ricky the Dragon Steamboat to the limit at Boston Garden. Gold would finally come the Harts' way in January 87, when the Foundation defeated the Bulldogs for the tag team titles at a Superstars taping in Tampa. The pair would hold the belts for about 9 months before dropping them to Strikeforce that fall. Hart also had the distinction of being the first entry into a televised Royal Rumble match. We all bloody love a Royal Rumble. He lasted more than 25 minutes in 1988's version of the match, and later on that year, the Hart Foundation would turn babyface. The Pink and Black Attack would then feud with former manager Jimmy Hart, but as the calendar flipped to 1989, Bret lived something of a dual existence, as the Harts remained a steady mid-card tandem, while he also worked brilliant singles bouts against good friend Mr. Perfect. Some of those classics have made it to DVD releases, while an August 89 match between the two in Anchorage was claimed by both men to be each's best match. In this period, Hart also wrestled a singles bout with Andre the Giant in Milan, Italy, which came about due to Andre wanting to work a match with Bret at least once. After continuing to tread water as a reliable duo, the Harts regained tag team gold at SummerSlam 1990, defeating Demolition in a thrilling 2 out of 3 falls battle in Philadelphia. They were set to drop the belts to the Rockers that fall on Saturday night's main event, but a broken ring rope as well as a change of heart from Vince McMahon kept the straps with the Foundation. They would instead keep the belts until WrestleMania 7, losing them to a pair of nasty boys. The Nasty Boys. The match spelled the end of the Hart Foundation after 6 years as Neidhart migrated into a commentator's role while Bret's true singles singles push was set to begin. It was at the onset of his singles push that Hart learned how to apply a Scorpion Deathlock from Conan, who was working tryout matches at the tapings following WrestleMania 7. Redubbed the Sharpshooter, Hart made effective use of his new finisher, establishing it as a genuine match ender very quickly. It would be this hold with which he would make Mr. Perfect submit at SummerSlam 91, winning the Intercontinental title in a well-regarded match inside Madison Square Garden. Hart quickly established himself as a fighting workhorse champion, the reserved but confident competitor in a locker room full of over-the-top muscle men and extroverted characters. Bret would lose the title to the Mountie at a house show days before the 1992 Royal Rumble, a point in which Bret was nearly set to jump ship to WCW. We'll hear that story repeated again a little later on. But Hart would stay on with WWE and have one of the best years of his entire career. His next career achievement came at WrestleMania 8, where he regained the IC title from the man who'd beaten the Mountie for it, Rowdy Roddy Piper. The Hot Rod rarely lost via clean pinfall in WWE, but there he was, doing the honours after a bloody Hart devised an ingenious counter to his sleeper hold. More important than the belt even was a clean victory over a certified icon. Bret held the championship through the summer of 1992, retaining it in a cult favourite ladder match, the first ever in WWE, over a young Shawn Michaels that July. The following month, in what is perhaps the pièce de résistance of his entire wrestling career, Hart lost the belt to brother-in-law Davey Boy Smith at SummerSlam 1992 in front of 80,000 of Smith's countrymen in London's Wembley Stadium. Get in, Davey Boy, it's coming home, it's coming home. Wrestling is coming home. The match was a 26-minute technical epic masterminded by Hart, who had to carry a sadly addled, forgetful Smith through the entire match. The Hitman stated later during his Hall of Fame induction that he rated it as his favourite match ever, and if you've seen it, it's easy to understand why. But Bret would not go without physical accolades for too long. Just 6 weeks after SummerSlam, Hart arrived early at a Superstars taping in Saskatoon, where he would be given rather startling news. He would be defeating Ric Flair that night for the WWE Championship. This decision to go with Hart as the company's flag bearer seemed a little bit sudden, but no matter, because the Canadian fans went absolutely wild as soon as Flair submitted to Hart's Sharpshooter in a lengthy match. Hart reassumed the mantle of fighting champion that he'd originally held with the IC belt, defeating Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon at consecutive pay-per-views before entering into WrestleMania 9 weekend. And then things went a little bit strange. Hart assumed that he was going over on Royal Rumble winner Yokozuna, as Vince McMahon allegedly told him months earlier that he wanted to keep the belt on Bret for a year. That's why Hart was understandably a little bit stunned to hear about the double title switch that would see Yokozuna win the belt and then lose it to Hulk Hogan immediately after. I'm a real American, fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American. Thanks very much, Bret. See you in a bit. Hart remained as popular as ever though, winning the 93 King of the Ring tournament and entering into a highly personal feud with Jerry the King Lawler, a feud that resulted in Hart nearly mangling a careless King at SummerSlam 93. WWE pressed on with Hogan and later Lex Luger as the heavyweight face of the company, but Bret merely bided his time. Plans for Luger to ascend to the top changed at the 94 Royal Rumble, where he and Bret eliminated each other at the match's conclusion. Fans overwhelmingly sided with Hart as the choice of challenger for Yokozuna at WrestleMania 10, but the Hitman would have to pull double duty come the show. Though he'd get a title shot, he would first have to face brother Owen, who completed his impending heel turn the night of the Rumble by kicking Bret's leg out of his leg. Verbal flubs aside, the siblings opened WrestleMania with a magnificent show of science and aggression, with Owen scoring the upset win. At the night's end, however, Bret, sore leg and all, managed to upset champion Yokozuna to win the gold a second time, while Owen could only look on in envious disgust. The brothers would continue their rivalry as Owen knew he'd beaten Bret once and could do it once more, this time with the richest prize at stake. Owen followed in Bret's footsteps by winning the 94 King of the Ring and aligning himself with the returning Jim Neidhart, who seemed besieged by his own jealousy towards Bret. Bret survived the summer, however, with his gold intact, first in a highly competitive match with the 1-2-3 Kid, then against Bob Backlund, before outlasting Owen in a dramatic steel cage match at SummerSlam 94. This was done in front of much of the Hart family, including Neidhart and Davey Boy Smith, present at ringside. However, the war would not end there, as Owen remained hell-bent on taking his brother down. On Thanksgiving Eve at Survivor Series, Bret lost the belt to 45-year-old Bob Backlund in an unusual towel match, which necessitated a cornerman throwing in a towel to indicate surrender for their wrestler. Through an elaborate sequence, Bret ended up hopelessly ensnared in Backlund's chicken wing, and a suddenly remorseful Owen, in a well-done ruse, he wasn't actually remorseful, convinced heartbroken mother Helen to throw in the towel on her son's behalf. In these controversial circumstances, Bret's second reign had ended, leading to a rather underwhelming 1995 for the Hitman that saw much occupancy in the mid-card, battling a cadre of new and unfamiliar faces. After stalemating new champion Diesel at the 95 Royal Rumble, Hart avenged the misdeeds of Owen and Backlund by making them both submit it that spring. After that, Bret renewed his feud with Jerry Lawler, suffering a humiliating defeat to him at the first In Your House pay-per-view. But Bret would gain his revenge, downing the King in a Kiss My Foot match at the '95 King of the Ring. Hart's next opponents would be debuting Dr. Isaac Yankem DDS at that year's SummerSlam, followed by a truly underrated gem against scrappy pirate Jean-Pierre Lafitte the following month at In Your House. But many would concur that Bret had been out of the main event scene for far too long. Thankfully, he regained the WWE Championship from Diesel at Survivor Series 95, making him just the second person after Hulk Hogan to win 3 WWE titles. Hart, however, would merely be the vessel for helping culminate a professional rival's boyhood dream. We're sure you know who we're talking about. Shawn Michaels would take the title from Bret Hart at WrestleMania 12 after 60 minutes plus overtime in an Iron Man match. Following the loss, Hart would take a near 8-month sabbatical, with the exception of some appearances on international tours. It was during this time that WCW made a lucrative offer to Hart in order to jump ship, only for Bret to accept a 20-year deal with WWE that would have allowed him to eventually migrate into an advisor role backstage. I think the fact that we didn't see Bret knocking around in WWE in 2016 kind of indicates how that deal went down. As Bret's time off started to draw to a close, a hungry young lion began tossing fighting words his way by the name of Stone Cold Steve Austin. As part of his grand return, Bret accepted Austin's repeated challenges, and the two battled at Survivor Series 96 inside Madison Square Garden. It was there that Bret took the brunt of Austin's best shots, only to narrowly edge out the upstart in a wonderful match. Bret was treated as a conquering hero by the fans, but the tone of his character would soon change. After Stone Cold screwed Hart over to win the '97 Royal Rumble match, Bret took to complaining more regularly, removing the calm coolness that had been his hallmark. That February, Hart reigned for one day after winning the vacant WWE title at In Your House Final 4 before Austin cost him the gold the very next night in a match with Psycho Sid. Hart and Austin then battled once more at WrestleMania 13 in a submission match, considered to be among not only the greatest WrestleMania matches ever, but the very best in WWE history as well. Hart's poor sportsmanship and glimmering cowardice in the post-match solidified his heel turn, just as a valiant and bloody Austin had crossed over into the babyface realm. From there, Bret blamed the moral decay of the United States for his change in attitude, and after drawing international battle lines, reunited with Owen and Davey Boy as the Hart Foundation. Later, they recruited Jim Neidhart and family friend Brian Pillman into the faction, ruling Monday Night Raw with ambush attacks and championship wins. The quintet defeated an Austin-led USA team at Canadian Stampede that July before one of the rowdiest crowds you'd ever see. 4 weeks later, thanks to an unintentional assist from Shawn Michaels, Hart captured his final WWE Championship from The Undertaker at SummerSlam 97. That triumph would not last long. Vince McMahon apparently began to show buyer's remorse regarding Hart's 20-year contract, and openly encouraged his astonished champion to reopen talks with WCW. By Halloween weekend, Bret, against his own desires, signed with WCW, and was prepared to drop his title on the way out. The catch was, he refused to lose to Shawn Michaels, especially in Canada at the upcoming Survivor Series. And we're guessing you know what happens next. Hart falls victim to a fandom submission call at Earl Hebner's hand while trapped in Shawn's own application of the sharpshooter, the Montreal Screwjob. The Screwjob would become indelibly part of pro wrestling lore, from what we saw on TV to Hart knocking McMahon out with an uppercut in front of the boys backstage. One day after Hart left Vince laying, Eric Bischoff made the announcement on Monday Nitro that the Hitman was on his way into the company. His debut would come in an episode of Nitro in mid-December, being named as the guest referee for a Starrcade match pitting Bischoff against Larry Zbyszko, and in the Sting vs Hollywood Hulk Hogan finale. Despite beating Ric Flair in a competitive match at Sold Out the next month, WCW's use of Hart was rather suspect, as he turned heel and face and heel again so often that his effectiveness wore off rather quickly. WCW's lack of foresight and control had killed off one of their hottest signings ever. Bret would enter into an angle with Goldberg at a March 99 Nitro in Toronto that would see him quit the company as a work. But Hart would soon have real thoughts about leaving wrestling altogether, as brother Owen tragically fell to his death in a stunt gone wrong at WWE's Over the Edge that May. Bret found the strength to press on, returning to the ring later that summer. He would defeat Chris Benoit in a pure wrestling masterpiece in October, a match that was dedicated to Owen's memory, and in fact took place in the same Kemper Arena where the accident occurred. Hart won the WCW Championship the following month at Mayhem in a tournament final over Benoit. He would be defending the title against Goldberg at Starrcade in December when an errant kick from the challenger badly concussed Bret. He tried to continue to fight through the residual pain in the weeks that followed before finally getting himself checked out. He was told by his doctor that his wrestling career was over due to the severity of the injury. And after a long period of inactivity, WCW released him from his contract in October 2000, and Hart subsequently retired shortly thereafter. It was a strangely muted end to a glittering career, and further setbacks would also occur in Hart's life, including the death of both parents and several close friends in the business, as well as a stroke sustained during a bicycle accident. After a lengthy recovery, Hart found himself in WWE's graces once more, collaborating on a DVD set in 2005, and also entering into the Hall of Fame the following year. His memoirs, entitled Hitman: My Real Life in the Cartoon World of Wrestling, were released to great critical acclaim in 2007. Seriously, check it out if you haven't read it. It's one of the best wrestling books ever written. Bret even re-entered the ring in 2010 for some low-impact matchups with Vince McMahon, The Nexus, and The Miz, from whom Hart would actually win the United States title in a feel-good moment in his native Canada. Now 61 years old and a grandfather, Bret remains as relevant as he ever has to the sport, even if he hasn't wrestled a regular match in close to 2 decades. A generation of Harts after him, including nephews Tyson Kidd, Harry Smith, and Teddy Hart, as well as Natalya, have kept the Hart legacy going, each forever intertwined with their distinguished uncle. His collection of matches have stood the test of time, as he is both a throwback to a cherished era gone by, but remarkably fresh when viewed in archive form. The Hitman would confidently claim that he was the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be, and even outside the confines of the story, that statement may still ring true. So that is the captivating career of Bret the Hitman Hart. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to, at Jack the Jobber. You can follow all of us at Cultaholic, and check out our Patreon as well, patreon.com/Cultaholic. And never forget, of course, if you haven't done so already, to hit subscribe and to join us.